Blood stained Lillian Blackwell's trembling hands as she stumbled through the darkening desert, one arm cradling her swollen belly. The year was 1873, and she had nothing left in this world but the unborn child she carried, and the desperate hope that she could outrun her brother-in-law's rage before nightfall. The sun hung low over the Mojave Desert, casting long shadows across the parched landscape. 6 months pregnant and exhausted, Lillian knew she couldn't keep walking much longer. Her late husband's brother, Vernon, had made his intentions clear after discovering her condition. He wanted the Blackwell land that would pass to her child, and he'd do anything to claim it. "You'll marry me and that bastard will be mine, or I'll make sure neither of you live to see winter," he had snarled earlier that day, whiskey heavy on his breath as he cornered her in the barn. Lillian had fled with only the clothes on her back and the small knife she'd used to defend herself when Vernon tried to stop her. The memory of his enraged face as she slashed his arm made her quicken her pace despite her fatigue. In the distance, she spotted a tendril of smoke rising against the dimming sky. A ranch, perhaps, or a lone settler. Either way, it meant shelter, possibly water. Determination fueled her final push forward as darkness began to claim the desert. The small homestead came into view as she crested a sandy rise, a modest cabin with a barn and corral. A man stood silhouetted against the warm glow coming from the cabin's windows, his tall frame leaning against the porch post as he smoked a cigarette. "Hello," Lillian called weakly, her voice barely carrying on the evening breeze. The man straightened immediately, hand moving instinctively to his hip where a revolver rested. "Who's there?" His voice was deep, wary. "Please," she managed before her legs finally gave out beneath her, sending her crumpling to the ground. She was vaguely aware of strong arms lifting her, of being carried. Then darkness claimed her completely. Lucian Ramirez had been enjoying the peaceful end of a long day when the woman's voice had startled him from his thoughts. Now he looked down at the unconscious stranger on his bed, pregnant, injured, and clearly running from something or someone. He dampened a cloth and gently wiped the blood from her hands, relieved to find it wasn't her own. Her fine dress, though dusty and torn, spoke of some wealth, as did the gold wedding band on her finger. "What kind of trouble are you in, madam?" he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. When she finally stirred an hour later, her eyes flew open in panic, hands immediately protecting her belly. "Easy now," Lucian said softly, keeping his distance. "You're safe here." Lillian pushed herself up against the headboard, taking in the stranger before her. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a surprising blue against his weathered face. "Where am I?" she asked, voice hoarse. "My ranch, about 15 miles east of Mojave." He offered her a cup of water, which she accepted gratefully. "Name's Lucian Ramirez. Most folks call me Luke. Lillian Blackwell," she replied after draining the cup. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Ramirez, but I should go. I've brought trouble to your doorstep." "Madam, you're in no condition to go anywhere tonight." His tone was gentle but firm. "Whatever trouble you're running from will have to wait till morning at least." The baby kicked then, a strong movement that made her wince. Lucian's eyes followed the motion, his expression softening. "When's the little one due?" 3 months, give or take." She hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "My husband died 4 months ago. Mining accident." Lucian nodded, not pressing for more. "You must be hungry. I've got stew warming." As he turned to leave, Lillian caught his sleeve. "Mr. Ramirez, the man who's looking for me. He's dangerous. I can't stay here and put you at risk." He studied her face, noting the genuine fear in her eyes. "Who's after you, Mrs. Blackwell?" "My brother-in-law, Vernon Blackwell. He wants our land, and he'll do anything to get it." Her voice broke, "Including forcing me to marry him or worse." Lucian's jaw tightened. "And the child would be raised as his if he lets it live at all." She met his gaze steadily. "I won't let that happen." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded once. "No, you won't. Because no one will find you here, Mrs. Blackwell. No one will know." The simple promise, spoken with such quiet certainty, brought tears to Lillian's eyes. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My mother taught me better than to turn away a woman in need, especially one carrying a child." He gestured to the room. "Rest now. We'll figure things out in the morning." After Lucian left, Lillian sank back against the pillows, one hand protectively covering her belly. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel something close to hope. Dawn broke clear and hot over the ranch. Lucian had spent the night on a bedroll near the fireplace, waking at first light to begin his chores. He was feeding the horses when he heard the cabin door open and turned to see Lillian standing on the porch, her golden hair catching the early morning light. "You should be resting," he called, setting down the feed bucket. "I've imposed enough." She stepped carefully down from the porch, one hand steadying herself on the railing. "I need to find passage to San Francisco. I have family there." Lucian crossed to her, noting how she'd managed to clean her dress and arrange her hair. Even tired and afraid, she carried herself with dignity. "San Francisco is a long journey for anyone, let alone a woman in your condition." He gestured toward the corral. "Come see the horses while we talk. I've been thinking about your situation." Curious, she followed him to the fence where several fine quarter horses grazed in the morning light. "That bay mare is the gentlest creature I've ever owned," he said, pointing to a beautiful chestnut-colored horse. "Good with children, too." "She's lovely," Lillian replied, confused by the change in subject. "I've been running this ranch alone for 5 years now," Lucian continued, leaning against the fence post. "Built the cabin, dug the well, put up every post of that fence myself." He paused. "But the place is too big for one man. I've been meaning to hire help." Understanding dawned on Lillian's face. "Mr. Ramirez, hear me out," he interrupted gently. "I propose a solution. You stay here as my housekeeper until the baby comes. To anyone who asks, you're a widow from back east, hired to help with the domestic matters while I tend the ranch." His eyes met hers. "No one will look for you here. After the baby comes, if you still want to go to San Francisco, I'll see you safely there myself." Lillian stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. "Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" Lucian looked away, something unreadable crossing his face. "Let's just say I understand what it means to need a second chance." He straightened. "It's a business arrangement, Mrs. Blackwell. You cook and keep house, I provide shelter and protection. Nothing more." The practical nature of his offer was reassuring, though Lillian didn't miss the kindness beneath it. She weighed her options, knowing that traveling alone in her condition would be dangerous, perhaps fatal, and Vernon would be looking for her at stage stops and train stations. "I accept your offer, Mr. Ramirez," she said finally, "but only until the baby comes. Then I must leave. Vernon won't stop looking for us." Lucian nodded. "Then it's settled. We'll need a story for the neighbors, such as they are. My closest is old Bill Henderson, 5 miles west. He comes by for coffee every week or so. As you said, I'm a widow from back east, hired as your housekeeper." She managed a small smile. "It's not so far from the truth. Indeed." He seemed to hesitate before adding, "There's one more thing. If anyone should come asking, it would be more respectable. If they believed we were related, perhaps you could be my cousin." Lillian considered this. "A distant cousin, perhaps, though we look nothing alike." My mother was fair like you, he offered. We could say you're from her side of the family. A shout from the road interrupted their conversation. Lucian instinctively moved in front of Lillian, shielding her from view as a rider approached. "Morning, Ramirez," called the newcomer, an older man with a weathered face and silver-streaked beard. "Thought I'd stop by on my way to town." "Henderson," Lucian acknowledged with a nod. "Good timing. I'd like you to meet my cousin, Mrs. Blackwell. She's come to help me with the domestic matters." Bill Henderson's bushy eyebrows rose in surprise as he noticed Lillian. "Well now, didn't know you had family in these parts, Luke." His eyes registered her condition, but he was tactful enough not to mention it. "Pleasure to make your acquaintance, madam." "Likewise, Mr. Henderson," Lillian replied, forcing herself to appear calm despite her racing heart. "Lillian's husband passed recently," Lucian explained smoothly. "I offered her a place to stay until she decides what comes next." Henderson nodded sympathetically. "Right decent of you, Luke. These parts ain't easy for a woman alone." He tipped his hat to Lillian. "If you need anything, madam, my place isn't far." "The missus would be pleased to have another woman to talk to." "Thank you, that's very kind," Lillian said, grateful for the man's ready acceptance of their story. After Henderson departed, promising to send his wife for a visit soon, Lillian released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That went well," Lucian observed, leading the way back to the cabin. "But we should prepare for more questions. People will talk." "Let them," Lillian replied with unexpected firmness, "so long as the talk doesn't reach Vernon's ears." Inside the cabin, she took stock of her surroundings properly for the first time. The main room served as kitchen and living area, simply but solidly furnished. A door led to the bedroom she'd occupied, and another, she presumed, to Lucian's room. "It's not much," he said, watching her survey the space, "but it's clean and sound." "It's lovely," she replied honestly. "A real home." Something flickered in his eyes at her words, pleasure perhaps, or pride. "I'll show you where everything is, then head into Mojave for supplies." "We'll need to get you some things." "I have no money," she admitted. "Everything I had was left behind." "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said simply, ending any protest she might have made. That evening, after Lucian returned with supplies including fabric, sewing notions, and several ready-made garments that would accommodate her growing figure, Lillian prepared her first meal as housekeeper of the Ramirez ranch. The simple act of cooking in a clean kitchen with fresh ingredients did more to restore her spirits than anything else could have. As they ate, Lucian asked about her skills. "Can you ride, Mrs. Blackwell?" "Yes, though it's been some time." "And please, if we're to be cousins, you should call me Lillian." He nodded. "Lillian, then, and I'm Lucian to you." He passed her the bread. "Tomorrow I'll show you around the property. There are some places you should know about in case—" He didn't finish the thought. "In case Vernon finds me," she supplied quietly. "Yes, there's a hidden ravine about a mile east that leads to a small cave. Good place to hide if needed." His expression was serious. "I don't mean to frighten you, but it's best to be prepared." "I appreciate your thoroughness, Lucian." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "What do you know of the law in these parts? Would the sheriff help me if Vernon found me?" Lucian considered her question. "Sheriff Miller's a good man, but the law often favors a man's claim over a woman's in matters of property and family, without proof of Vernon's threats." He shook his head. "It's safer if he never finds you in the first place." Lillian nodded, accepting the harsh reality. "Then I'll need to be invisible until the baby comes." "Not invisible," Lucian corrected. "Just someone else entirely." The following weeks established a rhythm to their lives. Lillian kept the cabin immaculate. cooked meals that Lucian praised with quiet appreciation, and gradually learned the workings of the ranch. Despite her condition, she insisted on contributing beyond household duties, collecting eggs from the small chicken coop and tending the kitchen garden Lucian had started but neglected. For his part, Lucian worked from sunrise to sunset, returning dusty and tired but always with a gentle word and often with small treasures: wildflowers, a bird's nest fallen from a tree, once a tiny carved wooden horse that he shyly presented for the little one. Mrs. Henderson visited as promised, bringing preserves and staying for tea. She was a kind, maternal woman who clucked sympathetically over Lillian's widowhood and offered advice about the baby without prying into personal matters. "You're fortunate to have family nearby," she said before leaving. "Lucian Ramirez is a good man, keeps to himself mostly, but always willing to lend a hand to neighbors. Been wondering when he'd finally find himself a wife." Lillian blushed at the older woman's implication. "We're only cousins, Mrs. Henderson." "Of course, dear Mrs. Henderson replied with a knowing smile that suggested she believed otherwise. "But cousins or not, I haven't seen that boy look at anyone the way he looks at you when you're not watching." The comment stayed with Lillian long after Mrs. Henderson departed. That evening, as she and Lucian sat on the porch watching the sunset, she found herself studying him when he gazed at the horizon, noting the strong line of his jaw, the gentleness in his eyes that belied his rugged exterior. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. A hint of amusement in his voice caught. Lillian turned her attention back to her mending. "I was just thinking how peaceful it is here." He seemed to accept her explanation. "It is that I never much cared for towns. Too many people, too much noise." "Have you always lived so remotely?" A shadow crossed his face. "No, grew up outside Santa Fe. My father had a trading post." He paused. "Died in the war, Confederate side." "I'm sorry," Lillian said softly. Lucian shrugged. "Long time ago now." He glanced at her. "What about you? Before you married, I mean." "My father was a banker in St. Louis. When he died, there wasn't much left after his debts were paid. I became a school teacher." She smiled at the memory. "I loved it. The children, the books, everything about it." "You miss it," he observed. "Yes, though teaching one child will be adventure enough, I expect." She placed a hand on her growing belly. "Sometimes I worry I won't know what to do." "You'll know," he said with surprising conviction. "Some things come natural when they need to." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Lucian was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Stay here," he instructed, moving to the edge of the porch. 3 riders emerged from the gathering dusk, stopping at the edge of the yard. The leader, a tall man with a sheriff's badge, raised a hand in greeting. "Evening, Ramirez. Sorry to disturb you so late." "Sheriff Miller," Lucian acknowledged, relaxing slightly but keeping his hand near his weapon. "What brings you out this way?" "Looking for a woman," the sheriff replied, dismounting. "Run away from near Bakersfield. Brother-in-law's mighty worried about her. Says she's not right in the head since her husband passed. Pregnant, too." He glanced past Lucian to where Lillian sat, frozen in place. "Evening, madam." Lillian forced herself to nod politely, heart hammering in her chest. Vernon had reported her missing to the authorities, just as she'd feared. Lucian stepped into the sheriff's line of sight, subtly blocking his view of Lillian. "Haven't seen any strangers passing through, Sheriff." "Just my cousin, Mrs. Blackwell. She's staying with me until her baby comes." Sheriff Miller studied Lillian for a moment longer, then turned his attention back to Lucian. "Your cousin, you say? Henderson mentioned you had family visiting." "That's right. From my mother's side back east." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Well, if you do see anything unusual, let me know. This woman might be in danger to herself, mostly, according to her brother-in-law. Name's Lillian Blackwell. Lillian couldn't suppress a small gasp at hearing her name. Lucian's expression never changed, but she saw his shoulders tense. Blackwell, you say? He repeated casually. Common enough name, I suppose. Any relation, Lily? The shortened version of her name, which he'd never used before, was enough to warn her to play along. I don't believe so, she replied, keeping her voice steady. My late husband's people were from Pennsylvania. Sheriff Miller seemed satisfied. If you spot her, send word immediately. Her brother-in-law's offering a reward. I'll keep an eye out, Lucian promised, walking with the sheriff back to his horse. But folks passing through usually head for the main road, not out here. After the riders departed, Lillian collapsed back into her chair, trembling violently. He's found me, she whispered. Vernon's found me. Lucian knelt beside her, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. He hasn't found you, he said firmly. He's looking, but he hasn't found you, and he won't. You don't know him, she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. He won't stop, and now the law is helping him. The law is looking for Lillian Blackwell, a disturbed widow from Bakersfield. He squeezed her hands gently. But you're Lily Ramirez now, my cousin from back east, sound of mind and perfectly at home here. That's who the sheriff saw tonight, and that's who everyone will continue to see. His certainty was comforting, but Lillian knew better than to underestimate Vernon's determination. What if he comes himself? He'll recognize me instantly. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Lucian's eyes hardened. I won't let him hurt you or your child, Lillian. I give you my word. Something in his voice, a steel that hadn't been there before, made her believe him. She nodded, the worst of her panic subsiding. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. That night, despite her exhaustion, Lillian couldn't sleep. The baby was restless, kicking and turning as if sensing her distress. She got up and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. A movement caught her eye. Lucian, walking the perimeter of the property, rifle in hand. He was patrolling, she realized, protecting them. The sight brought fresh tears to her eyes, but these were different from the fearful ones earlier. For the first time since Charles had died, leaving her vulnerable to Vernon's schemes, Lillian felt truly protected. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew. Dangerous because it made her want things she couldn't have: permanence, security, a future here in this peaceful place with the quiet, honorable man who had taken in a stranger without question. As if sensing her watching, Lucian looked up at her window. Their eyes met across the moonlit yard, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of how their lives had unexpectedly entwined. Lillian raised her hand in a small gesture of acknowledgement. Lucian nodded once, then continued his vigil, disappearing into the shadows at the edge of the property. She returned to bed, one hand resting protectively over her child, the other clutching the small wooden horse Lucian had carved. Despite the danger still lurking outside their sanctuary, sleep came easier now, wrapped in the knowledge that she wasn't facing it alone. The following days passed in heightened vigilance. Lucian made excuses to visit neighbors, gathering information about any strangers in the area. He reported back that a man matching Vernon's description had indeed been in Mojave, showing Lillian's portrait and offering money for information. Did anyone recognize me from the portrait? Lillian asked fearfully. No one's made the connection, Lucian assured her. The portrait shows you differently: hair up, fancier dress. Besides, most folks around here have only seen you once or twice, and they know you as my cousin. Still, they took precautions. Lillian no longer hung laundry outside where it could be seen from the road. Lucian taught her to use his rifle and made sure she knew the escape routes from the property. I've never fired a gun before, she admitted as they stood behind the barn, where he'd set up targets. "Pray you never need to," he replied, positioning her hands correctly on the weapon. "But if you do, aim for the center and don't hesitate." His proximity as he adjusted her stance was distracting the warmth of him at her back, the gentle pressure of his hands correcting her grip. Lillian focused on the target, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the baby. When she finally pulled the trigger, the force of the shot pushed her back against his chest. His arms steadied her, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Good," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Again." By the end of the lesson, Lillian could hit the target consistently, though not always where she aimed. It was enough, Lucian assured her, to scare off most threats. As her pregnancy advanced, Lucian insisted she rest more, taking over some of the household duties himself. Lillian protested at first, but soon found herself grateful for his consideration as the summer heat intensified, making even simple tasks exhausting. One particularly scorching afternoon, Lucian returned from town with an unexpected gift: a rocking chair for the porch, sturdy and comfortable, with cushions Mrs. Henderson had contributed. "You shouldn't have," Lillian said, running her hands over the smooth wood. "It must have been expensive." "Every home needs a rocking chair," he replied simply, "for when the little one comes." The casual reference to his cabin as her home and his obvious planning for the baby's arrival stirred emotions Lillian tried to suppress. This arrangement was temporary, she reminded herself. Once the baby was born, she would leave for San Francisco as planned. But as July turned to August and her time grew nearer, Lillian found it increasingly difficult to imagine leaving. She'd made the small cabin truly hers: curtains at the windows, wildflowers in jars on the table, the pantry stocked with preserves she'd put up herself from the garden's harvest. And more than that, she'd grown accustomed to Lucian's quiet presence, his subtle attentiveness, the way his rare smile transformed his entire face. They never spoke of it, this growing attachment between them. It existed in small gestures. Lucian bringing her tea before she asked for it, Lillian mending his shirts without being told they needed it, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked side by side. Mrs. Henderson, who visited regularly now, noticed the change. "You two are good for each other," she commented one afternoon as she helped Lillian prepare for the baby's arrival. "Lucian's different since you came, lighter somehow." Lillian concentrated on folding the tiny clothes they'd sewn. "He's been very kind to take me in." "Kind, yes, Mrs. Henderson agreed with a knowing smile. "But it's more than kindness I see in that man's eyes when he looks at you." Before Lillian could formulate a response, a sharp pain gripped her abdomen, making her gasp and reach for the table's edge. Mrs. Henderson was at her side instantly. "Is it time, dear?" Lillian nodded, fear and excitement mingling as another contraction followed quickly. "It's too early," she whispered. 2 weeks at least." "Babies come when they're ready, not when we expect them," Mrs. Henderson said pragmatically, helping Lillian to the bedroom. "I'll send my boy for Lucian. He's helping Bill with fence repairs. Then I'll get things ready here." The next hours passed in a blur of pain for Lillian. She was vaguely aware of Lucian arriving, his face pale with concern as Mrs. Henderson shooed him from the bedroom. She heard his boots pacing the floor outside, his murmured questions whenever Mrs. Henderson emerged for fresh water or linens. As twilight deepened into night, Lillian's labor intensified. "I can't," she sobbed after a particularly brutal contraction. "I can't do this." "You can and you will," Mrs. Henderson said firmly, wiping Lillian's brow. "Women have been doing this since Eve, child. Your body knows what to do." The door cracked open and Lucian's voice came through, strained with worry. "Is there anything I can do, pray, young man?" Mrs. Henderson replied. And keep that water boiling. Another hour passed before Lillian finally felt the overwhelming urge to push. Mrs. Henderson positioned herself, nodding encouragement. "That's it, dear. I can see the head. One more good push." With a final, tremendous effort, Lillian delivered her child into the world. The baby's first cry, strong and indignant, was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "A boy," Mrs. Henderson announced, quickly cleaning and wrapping the infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Tears streamed down Lillian's face as the older woman placed her son in her arms. He was perfect, tiny fingers curled into fists, a wisp of dark hair, eyes squeezed shut against the new world. "Lucian," she called weakly. "Come see." He entered hesitantly, hat in hands, his expression a mixture of awe and uncertainty as he approached the bed. When he saw the baby, something in his face softened completely. "He's magnificent," he whispered, reaching out one finger to touch the infant's cheek. "Just like his mother." Lillian smiled tiredly. "Would you like to hold him?" Lucian looked startled. I've never held a baby before." "First time for everything," Mrs. Henderson said briskly, taking the child and placing him in Lucian's arms before he could protest. "Support his head, that's right." The sight of the tall, rugged cowboy cradling her newborn son with such tender care brought fresh tears to Lillian's eyes. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she didn't want to leave this place or this man when the time came. "What will you name him?" Lucian asked, still gazing in wonder at the baby. Lillian had considered many names over the months, but now only one felt right. "Lucian Charles Blackwell," she said softly. "After the two best men I've known." Lucian looked up, surprise and something deeper etched on his features. "I'm honored," he said simply. Mrs. Henderson, sensing the emotion in the room, busied herself with cleanup. "I'll stay the night to help," she said. "But both mother and child are doing splendidly. God has blessed this house today." Later, after Lillian had nursed the baby and he slept peacefully beside her, Lucian returned to the bedroom, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired? Happy?" She smiled up at him. "Thank you for everything, Lucian." He took her hand in his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what happens next." Lillian's heart quickened. "Yes, you mentioned San Francisco, family there." His eyes met hers. "Is that still your plan?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Lillian thought of the journey ahead, the uncertainties of starting over in a strange city, the life she'd be taking her son away from, a life with fresh air, open spaces, and the steady presence of a man who had shown her more kindness than anyone she'd ever known. "I don't know any more," she admitted. "I thought it was the only option, but now—" "You have options," he said quietly. "You could stay here with me." Lillian's breath caught. "As your housekeeper." Lucian's hand tightened on hers. "No, as more than that, much more." Before he could continue, the sound of approaching riders shattered the moment. It was past midnight, far too late for casual visitors. Lucian was on his feet instantly, reaching for the rifle he'd left by the door. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice grim. "Keep the baby quiet, Mrs." Henderson appeared in the doorway, alarm clear on her face. "Someone's coming," she whispered unnecessarily. "I know." Lucian checked the rifle's chamber. "Stay with Lillian and the baby. No matter what happens, don't come out." Through the window, Lillian could see torchlight approaching. Multiple riders moving quickly. Fear coursed through her as she pulled her sleeping son closer. "It's him," she whispered. "It's Vernon." Lucian's jaw tightened. "Then it ends tonight, one way or another." He looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. "I meant what I said, Lillian. Remember that." Then he was gone, closing the bedroom door firmly behind him. Lucian stepped onto the porch just as the riders entered the yard. 5 men, Vernon Blackwell easily identifiable at their head. The moonlight revealed his florid face and expensive clothes, the silver flask he lifted to his mouth before dismounting. "Ramirez," Vernon called, swaying slightly as he approached the porch. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you, Blackwell," Lucian replied evenly, the rifle held casually but ready. "I suggest you ride on." Vernon laughed, an ugly sound. "The sheriff seems to think otherwise." "I have papers proving my sister-in-law's unsound mind, and as her nearest male relative, I have every right to take her and her child into my custody." He pulled a folded document from his coat. "Legal and binding." "Your papers mean nothing here," Lucian said, his voice hardening. "This is my land and I decide who stays and who goes." Vernon's face darkened. "She's here then, I knew it." He gestured to his companions. "Search the house, boys. Find the woman and her brat." Lucian raised the rifle to his shoulder. "Take one more step and I'll drop you where you stand." The men hesitated, looking to Vernon for direction. "You're outnumbered, Ramirez," Vernon snarled. "And she's not worth dying for, a used-up widow carrying another man's child. Give her up and I'll forget I ever saw this place." Something dangerous flickered in Lucian's eyes. "That used-up widow is worth 10 of you, Blackwell, and the child you're so eager to get your hands on is my son." Vernon's expression shifted from contempt to confusion. "Your son? Impossible. She was already carrying when she fled." "My son in every way that matters," Lucian clarified, not lowering the rifle. "And they're staying right here under my protection." Inside the bedroom, Lillian listened in growing horror. Lucian was putting himself at risk, risking everything for her and her child. She looked down at her sleeping son, then at Mrs. Henderson, who stood white-faced by the window. "Help me up," Lillian whispered, struggling to rise from the bed. "Child, you can't," Mrs. Henderson protested. "You've just given birth." "I won't hide while Lucian faces Vernon alone," Lillian insisted, already pulling on a robe. "This is my fight." Outside, the confrontation was escalating. Vernon, drunk and enraged, had drawn his own pistol. "I won't ask again, Ramirez. Step aside or we'll burn this place to the ground with you in it." "You're welcome to try," Lucian replied coldly. The bedroom door opened, and both men turned to see Lillian standing in the doorway, pale but upright, the baby cradled in her arms. "Lillian, get back inside," Lucian ordered, not taking his eyes off Vernon. "No," she said firmly, moving to stand beside him. "This ends now, Vernon." Vernon's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of her with the newborn. "So there it is," he sneered. "The heir to my brother's property. Hand it over, Lillian, and I might let you live." "This child will never be in your care," Lillian replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "And Charles's land was never yours to claim. The deed is in trust for his child with the bank as executor, not you." Vernon's face contorted with rage. "You lying whore. My brother made me his heir." "Your brother changed his will when he learned of the baby," Lillian countered. "Ask Mr. Peterson at the Bakersfield Bank if you don't believe me. He has the documents." Doubt flickered across Vernon's face, quickly replaced by calculation. "It makes no difference. Without a husband, the courts will give me guardianship of the child and control of the property." "She has a husband," Lucian interrupted, his steady gaze never leaving Vernon. "Me." Lillian turned to him in surprise, but Lucian continued before she could speak. "We were married by Pastor Williams in Mojave last month. The marriage certificate is inside if you'd like to see it." It was a bluff, a desperate one, but Vernon had no way of verifying it immediately. "This is absurd," Vernon sputtered, but Lillian could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "Sheriff Miller can confirm it," Lucian added smoothly. He witnessed the ceremony himself. Vernon's companions shifted uncomfortably, clearly losing confidence in their mission. One leaned over to whisper something to Vernon, who scowled in response. "This isn't over," Vernon threatened, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'll be back with the law." "Do that," Lucian invited calmly. "Bring the sheriff. He'll be happy to explain how he's been searching for a disturbed widow when in fact Mrs. Ramirez has been living peacefully with her husband all along." With a final venomous glare, Vernon holstered his weapon and remounted his horse. "You'll regret crossing me," he spat before wheeling his horse around and galloping away, his men following closely. The moment they were out of sight, Lillian's legs gave way. Lucian caught her with one arm, the other still cradling the rifle, and guided her to the rocking chair. "That was foolish," he chided gently, setting the rifle aside to take the baby from her arms. "You should be in bed." "I couldn't let you face him alone," she replied, watching as he expertly adjusted his hold on the sleeping infant. "And where did you learn to handle babies so confidently?" A small smile touched his lips. "Quick study." He sobered, kneeling beside her chair. "Lillian, about what I said." "Which part?" she asked. "The part where you claimed to be my husband, or the part where you called my son yours?" "Both," he admitted, "though I meant the second part with all my heart." He shifted the baby to one arm, his free hand finding hers. "As for the first part, I'd like it to be true." "If you'll have me," Lillian's breath caught. "Lucian, you don't have to do this. Vernon might not come back, and even if he does—" "This isn't about Vernon," he interrupted softly. "It's about us. You and me and this little one. I love you, Lillian. I think I have since that first night when you were so afraid but still so brave." Tears welled in her eyes. "But my situation, the complications—" "Life is complicated," he said simply. "But some things are clear as day. I love you. I love this child as if he were my own blood. And I want to spend my life with you both if you'll let me." Mrs. Henderson, who had been discreetly hovering in the doorway, sniffled loudly. "For heaven's sake, girl, say yes before he changes his mind." Lillian laughed through her tears, reaching out to touch Lucian's face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The joy that blazed across his face was answer enough, but he leaned forward to seal the promise with a gentle kiss that held all the tenderness and passion she'd ever dreamed of. "Pastor Williams will be here on Sunday, Mrs. Henderson announced practically. "No reason we can't make this official right away." Lucian smiled, not taking his eyes from Lillian's face. "No reason at all." 2 days later, with little Lucian Charles squirming in Mrs. Henderson's arms, Lillian and Lucian exchanged vows on their front porch. Sheriff Miller attended, as did several neighbors who'd come to know and respect the couple over the past months. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," Lillian confessed as they stood together that evening, watching the sunset from their porch. "Especially not when I stumbled onto your land, desperate and afraid." "You found more than happiness," Lucian replied, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You found home." He kissed the top of her head. "And so did I." The baby's cry from inside brought matching smiles to their faces. "Duty calls," Lillian sighed, but her eyes sparkled with contentment. Lucian caught her hand as she turned to go. "I meant what I said that night, you know. No one will ever know what you've been through, what you've overcome except me. And I'll spend my life making sure you never have to be afraid again." Lillian stood on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. "No one will know," she agreed, "but everyone will see how happy we are. That's a promise." As autumn turned to winter and winter to spring, the Ramirez ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. Vernon Blackwell never returned. Word reached them that he'd left California altogether, after the Bakersfield Bank confirmed Charles's will left everything in trust for his child. with Lillian as trustee. Little Lucian grew strong and curious, the image of his mother with hints of his biological father in his smile, but taking more and more after his adoptive father in manner and spirit. Lucian doted on the boy, teaching him about horses as soon as he could toddle to the corral fence. When Lillian discovered she was expecting again the following summer, the news was celebrated with joy throughout the small community that had embraced them. This time, her pregnancy was marked by happiness and anticipation rather than fear and hiding. Their daughter, Eleanor, arrived on a crisp October morning, with her father pacing outside just as anxiously as he had for the son who wasn't his by blood but was his in every way that mattered. As the years passed, the ranch expanded, as did their family. 2 more children joined them, Robert and Margaret, filling the once quiet cabin with laughter, squabbles, and the endless energy of youth. Lillian resumed teaching, first just her own children, then others from neighboring farms who rode over for lessons. Eventually, she established a proper school in Mojave, riding in 3 days a week while Lucian managed the ranch and cared for the younger children with the same capable tenderness he showed in all things. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the same porch where she had first sought refuge, Lucian presented Lillian with a gift, a journal bound in soft leather. "For your stories," he explained as she ran her fingers over the cover. "You've always said you wanted to write them down someday." Lillian smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I'm not sure anyone would believe them. A desperate pregnant widow, a kind cowboy who sheltered her. A love that grew from the most unlikely beginning," he finished, kissing her temple. "Maybe not, but I'd read it." That night, after the children were asleep, Lillian opened the journal and began to write. "The blood on my hands wasn't my own the night I stumbled onto his ranch, but the life I found there would forever be ours." 15 years after she had fled Vernon's threats with nothing but the clothes on her back and the child in her womb, Lillian stood on the porch of the home she and Lucian had built together, watching as their eldest son rode toward the horizon, off to college in San Francisco, the city that might have been her refuge but never her home. "He'll be back," Lucian said confidently, coming to stand beside her, his arms slipping naturally around her waist. "This place has a way of calling you home." Lillian smiled up at the man who had sheltered her when she had nothing, who had loved her child as his own, who had built with her a life more beautiful than she could have imagined in her darkest hour. "Yes," she agreed, thinking of that desperate night so long ago when she had heard his quiet promise, "No one will know," and found in those words the beginning of everything. "It certainly does."